My name is Katie Auney. I am the Assistant Dean for External Relations for Merrill College here at the University of Maryland. And I just want to welcome everybody this evening. Thank you for joining us. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get going. Everybody should be coming in muted and audio only. So we just ask that you stay that way throughout the program. There is a chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we encourage you to use that to submit questions for the panelists. Jay Kernis, our moderator, will be keeping an eye on that and posing some of those to the panelists as we go along. I also did just want to mention, I encourage you all to visit keeptogether.umd.edu. It's a university-wide website that has a variety of resources and information about virtual programming throughout the university, as well as ways that you can support our students at this time, particularly the class of 2020 as they head into graduation. So I also wanted to note that this is being recorded. And we will have it up on our YouTube channel after it's all done. So with that, I will turn things over to Jay Kernis. Jay is a graduate of Merrill College and a member of our Board of Visitors, and he is currently a producer for CBS Sunday Morning. So welcome, Jay.
Katie, thank you. For those of you who know me, and I can see classmates from my year, I note that I haven't had this amount of hair or facial hair since I was a resident of Anne Arundel. But so far there hasn't been a reason to shave, and there's no way to get my hair cut. By the way, you can't hear it. I'm in Manhattan, and right outside my window, this is what happens in this city. People are screaming and hitting pans, and it's actually very moving each night. It lasts around 2 minutes. I want to welcome the panel. Teddy Amenabar is from the class of 2015. He's a Metro audience editor for the Washington Post. Alexa Lardieri, also the class of 2015, is breaking news reporter and digital producer at US News and World Report. Jason Newton, class of 2000, is anchor and reporter at WBAL TV in Baltimore. And Margaret Talev is White House and politics editor at Axios. She's former president of the White House Correspondents Association and also a member of our Board of Visitors. Thank you for being here today. First question, what is your main job at this time? And what has been the most challenging part of your work?
I guess I can start. My main job is I work on the audience team at the Post, but I am embedded in the local section. And my job revolves around either asking readers questions or seeing how readers what questions they might have about the coronavirus, and then reflecting our coverage based on that. Because I'm embedded in local, a lot of my coverage that I help with is around the DC area, but we also, we answer questions that, people have nationally as well. So that's definitely not what my day job was 8 weeks ago. So it's changed.
And what's the toughest part of it?
Sorry?
What's the toughest part of your job now?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I think the toughest thing is that the news is changing every day, and that sounds cliche, but what I mean is the files and articles that we're publishing 2 weeks ago are not just out of date now, but possibly incorrect. And so we have to be really smart about making sure that the latest recommendations or the latest guidance is being reflected everywhere. And then also we have to just be smart about, what we don't know, which is a lot. So we try to make that clear as well.
Thank you for that. Alexa?
So I am breaking news reporter and digital producer, which means basically all day I monitor for breaking news. My job has pretty much stayed the same, but the content is different. Where I used to do breaking news, meaning election coverage or a new scientific discovery. Now everything is just breaking COVID news. So I've kind of just been focusing on the coronavirus pandemic, but still breaking news. So still, you know, super early, getting out there, what's going on, check Twitter, you know, check other breaking news sites and things like that. And then digitally producing things, just working in US News's content management system and publishing things to the site. And for the second part, I would say the most challenging thing about this whole ordeal is probably having COVID. So I had COVID way in the beginning of the whole New York, I'm based in New York City, so way in the beginning of the New York City outbreak. And it was very hard to, one, be sick, but two, be reporting on something that you're currently suffering from. So it was really scary, actually, because there was so much unknown way back in March when I first had it. And so I think that kind of took an emotional toll and a mental toll, and then compounded that with just this amount of information that's being thrown out into the world. So yeah, I would say that was definitely challenging.
Yeah, I think you're going to win this round. Do you feel okay?
I do, yeah. I was over it in mid-March, so I am A-okay now. And I have lots of antibodies.
Well, that's great to hear. You were able to get tested?
So I was not able to get tested at the time that I had it. I was diagnosed by 2 doctors, but they were not testing everyone in New York City. My boyfriend is a doctor, and I gave it to him, so he was then tested because he's a healthcare worker. And then a couple of weeks ago, I had the antibody test, which confirmed it.
Boy. Jason?
I have to follow that, huh? I'm glad you're doing better. I co-anchor the morning news on NBC affiliate here in Baltimore, and then I also host a public affairs show on Sundays, which, as a result of the coronavirus, had to become a podcast because we couldn't bring people into the building anymore. So that has been a challenge in itself, in trying to figure out how to make that work technically, but also as far as work goes. I agree with a lot of what Teddy was saying, but also for us, avoiding the monotony and to not let people understand how urgent this continues to be. I find sometimes a lot of folks here in Baltimore, we got through, I feel like, the first couple of weeks, and people felt the urgency, and they felt we got to stay home to keep this right. We got to do this to protect our families. But gradually, you would see more people doing things that you knew was going to put them in danger. And so I felt part of our job was to maintain the level of, listen, this is still real. This is still out there. Yes, you can go to the grocery store, but these are some things you need to do if you're going to make that trip. Because I still feel like, even to this point, I feel like there's still some naysayers out there who still feel like there's no chance of them catching this. And I think that we still have to, every day, whether it's through the numbers or going inside and seeing video inside of a hospital, whatever it takes, to let people know that this is still real, even though as we start to relax things in different states. And even here in Maryland today, there was some relaxation. We need to keep on them to remind them of how real the threat is.
Thank you for that. Margaret?
Thank you, Jay. Alexa, I'm really glad you're okay and that you're doing better. And I want to say hi to everyone who's joining us tonight, and thanks. We're looking forward to your questions. My job is to oversee all of the politics coverage at Axios. So that is the 2020 race, it's Congress, it's the White House. And the biggest challenges have been, I would say, in 2 categories. One is how to pivot away from kind of the latest wrangling on Capitol Hill and what, checking quarterly fundraising and how Trump and Biden are going to go after each other and who the nominee was going to be, how to pivot from that world to coronavirus and the politics and the political context of coronavirus. And then the second biggest challenge has been figuring out how to report without actually being with people. And in some ways, it's not as hard as it used to be. Like, everyone's reachable remotely now through text or phone or email or social media or some format. But in some spaces, the personal connection is about as important as it's always been. I would say one is on the campaign trail, right? The ability to talk to voters and the ability to see a candidate in action, the ability to pull an advisor off to the side and get a little scooplet. That's much harder to do when you're not there. Two is Congress. Congress is still one of the remaining places where you can be in a hallway and grab someone who they wouldn't take your phone call if you tried to, get the interview by phone, but you can just grab them between votes. Can't do that if you're not there. Can't do it if they're not there. And also, like, just in Washington, networking is such a big part of the job. So source drinks, source dinners, meetings where you might be able to meet new people, the kind of people you wouldn't have access to, all that's gone. So you have to kind of rely on the contacts you already had or other people's willingness to make contact with you when you didn't know them before. And then I guess the third layer of it as a manager of people is just managing the emotional transition we've all gone through when your work and your life completely bleed into one another, like way more than you ever, like we all already think, well, we work all the time and there's no work-life balance, but there really isn't when you're at home. And so managing just the things that come with that on top of the news challenges has been another one.
Thank you for that. Katie has sent me a question, but I want to set it up with another question, and then we'll go to that one. We are fact-checking all the time when the very idea of a fact is being called into question on a regular basis. How do you know what is true?
Well, I prescribe to, I like the idea of trusting science. And you hear Fauci say it a lot, and you hear a lot of folks here, whether it's Hopkins, University of Maryland Medical System. And I don't know, there's some comfort in knowing, and maybe as a kid, maybe, I don't know, where you're naive as a kid to always trust your doctor, but there is something about hearing the science because you feel like it has been proven. And I feel like you've seen it work. A lot of folks, as you watch Europe and things change there, you can sort of watch the timeline as it makes it back across the ocean to us. And so for me, I'm all about the science, and maybe because my father is a mathematician and a scientist, that I just trust that. And of course, it takes a second read, and maybe you look at an article after that, and then look at the wire and something down the road from there as well. But I always find that as a good starting point for us. Thank you.
Anyone else want to tackle that? How do you know what's true?
Actually, I would love to touch on that because I just feel like this is something that's really been amplified by covering the coronavirus pandemic. Already, we've seen a shift in society where facts are kind of disputable or in the eye of the beholder. I mean, they're not really, but if people think they are, then they effectively are for purposes of political consideration. And we do, one of the shifts that we did in our coverage is we developed a weekly poll with the research firm Ipsos. And I run the coverage of this in our newsroom. And every week we measure how public attitude toward different aspects of the virus is changing or how people experience it differently. We had this really interesting finding this week, just a couple of days ago. I reported on this yesterday. The finding was that 2/3 of Americans don't believe the statistics on death counts for coronavirus. 2 out of 3 don't believe the official count, but they don't believe it in different ways. And you can see what's coming. It divides almost exactly along partisan lines. So if you're a Democrat, you're much more likely to think that there is an undercounting of the real number of coronavirus deaths. If you're a Republican, you're much more likely to believe that the count is being overinflated and that the number is actually much smaller. And the process, and scientists will tell you there's an undercount, and it's not because scientists are Democrats. There's a reason why scientists say that. There are several reasons why scientists say that collectively, but between the lines, there's a reason also for the counter argument, which is that the definition of how to count a death toll has changed. Doctors have more flexibility because of the lack of testing availability and discretion given to them. There's a counter argument that says they could be bilking the numbers through Medicaid to try to get more money for Medicare, to try to get more money for the hospitals. So it's a very complex political issue that the facts get wrapped up in, and trying to convince readers that you don't have a political bias and that you are just telling a story that's literally based on facts is very difficult to do, and something that we've been going through this week.
But that raises the question from one of our viewers. at a time when confidence in journalism is under fire for ideological bias, is there concern that reporters are delivering news that is heavily weighted against this administration?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, you could continue.
Yeah, I just like, I don't know how to prove this to anybody who doesn't want to hear the proof, but mainstream news reporters are there to report the news. And you've seen, particularly in cable TV, which is how a lot of people get their daily snippets of news, you've seen a real shift in the coverage to emphasize doctors and scientists instead of political reporters. Like, I'm a very experienced political reporter. I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't want to try to explain to somebody how viruses spread. I don't want to be weighing in on scientific facts that I'm not qualified to talk about. And it's not in anyone's interest as a journalist to weigh in editorially on this. This is a once in a century kind of challenge for society that will impact elections probably, but is not driven by that. And I think as you've watched, like, it's easier to see on TV, but it's true if you look through online websites or through newspapers or radio reports as well, that just the experts who are being called to speak, the analysts who are being called to analyze are just, it's not even like a shift, it's an overnight transformation into experts who are actually qualified to talk about this.
Teddy, Alexa, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've worked on the audience team at the Post for 5 years. So I think my perspective is built around building trust with readers by trying to answer their questions directly when possible. And I think for this lane of coverage, it's really possible. So this doesn't get to the administration or national fears or concerns about the trust in media, but I think on a one-to-one basis, if you can answer whether or not it's safe to go to the pool, or what a epidemiologist says about running outside, then I think you've stepped a bit closer to like building a relationship with that person. And trust is hard to get. Like, it takes time. It's not one article. And then the other thing I'd say too is I think there's a lot of smart reporting from The Atlantic, and I've seen some from BuzzFeed News as well, where you just explain what scientists don't know. And I kind of said at the beginning, but like, I think it's just really important to, talk through that we don't know about exactly, whether or not you can contract COVID-19 through like an aerosol spread outside. And so I just think like having those conversations and then getting that into reporting is really important.
Alexa?
Yeah, kind of going off of what Margaret was saying is we're not having people come on and kind of editorialize. We're not having commentators. Yes, this will affect the 2020 election, and yes, there are politics involved, but this is something that there is data for, there is science for, and I think relying on the scientists and the data, statistics, things like that is really important. And you're obviously going to have people coming at journalists from all sides saying we're freaking out about this and we are overreacting and we're causing hysteria in the public. But I think when you have something like this and you have so much data to rely on, it's a little bit easier to build trust.
Thank you. Now, following up on this discussion, many stories tell readers, viewers, and listeners to wear masks, practice social distancing, wash your hands. There's a certain amount of advocacy in the stories we're all doing. What place does it have when covering this life and death situation? Where have you and where have your organizations drawn those lines?
Do you mean in terms of
how much you advocate in a story?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, sometimes it may not be as much advocating the story as what we're presenting when we're out there. I mean, our crews, our photographers and reporters haven't been in the building for 5 weeks now. I mean, Hearst Corporation has really been pretty strict on who's going to be coming in, who's coming out, the amount of distance that we show on the set. So I think even when reporters go out, most of the microphones are on a long pole as they're approaching people. In fact, we had a reporter this morning explain on the air why she didn't have her mask on as she was reporting, to explain, I just want to make sure you folks can hear us. I don't know if we come out directly and tell you this is what you have to do. In fact, I know that we don't, but I think that in practice, I think one, because we're human beings, and so we go home to families every night, and being out in public, we want to make sure that we come back healthy. But at the same time, I think we also want to present a picture of, listen, we're doing what we can to stay healthy. I'm not telling you what to do, but this is a step that we're taking to at least protect you potentially from us. I think that we start going down that same road again if we're preaching to people what to do, because that's what spurs the phone calls. And we get plenty of them into our newsroom as well. I think it's in practice. And then in the end, it becomes a personal choice to the people that we're telling the stories to. But we're definitely doing all we can to keep our staff safe. And if we project that and someone decides, hey, if they're doing it, we're going to do it, then so be it. That's just the most I think we can do, at least locally.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say in our case, that's not really the kind of journalism we're doing, although we'll do stories talking to scientists about the latest recommendations, and if that's what doctors are recommending, it will be reflected in our copy. But just in terms of coverage of the White House right now, and I think a lot of the people joining us today already know this, but your ability as a reporter to get into the White House right now is severely restricted. If you are not part of the pool that day, if you do not have a permanent seat in the briefing room, you're not going to be part of those activities. So we're relying increasingly on the print pool reporter or the network or wire reporters to be the eyes and ears of the full press corps. Those roles always exist, but they're amplified now. And if you're going to travel with the president, like the pool did yesterday to Phoenix, then that also means you're going to get tested at least 24 hours in advance by the White House medical team to make sure that you don't test positive for coronavirus. It means you're going to bring a mask with you, because you will be required to wear a mask into the Mayo Clinic or the GM plant or the 3M plant or wherever it is that you're going, the Honeywell plant. And so part of the precautions that the journalists covering the White House right now are taking are not advocacy precautions or even their own precautions, but they are the protocols set forth by the White House and the coronavirus task force to keep the president safe.
I guess I assumed that testing was going on. I didn't realize so much testing was going on.
Well, the president just began traveling again, so it's fairly new. Some of the shifting in the briefing kind of found its own way. Remember, the guy showed up with a thermometer the one day, and all of a sudden it was happening. So that's still happening. But if you want to actually travel in those confined spaces inside the pool cars on Air Force One in the cabin, you need to take extra precautions for obvious reasons. You're just a stone's throw away from the president, and Secret Service's job is not to protect us, it's to protect the president, including from us. So that's part of that package.
You know, I was on an airplane probably 4 or 5 times a month. I was always in theaters, live theaters, covering stories. I don't feel like I want to sit in a theater with 1,000 people for a long time. You know, if I get an assignment, it so happens that if you don't have to take any assignment that you feel puts you in danger, but I'm going to have to think a lot before I get on a very crowded airplane. The idea of attending a political rally as an assignment would give me pause at this point.
Well, and they're not, they haven't started doing the rallies again yet. But the president wants to. He's made pretty clear he wants to. His decision to do a town hall at the Lincoln Memorial by the steps there was kind of slicing the baby, right, in half, and getting back out on the road, even if it's to a mask making facility. It's not a rally, but he's made clear he'd like to do that as soon as he can. And I don't know at what point that's going to be. We don't know what's going to happen to the conventions. We know there's a real desire, especially among President Trump, to resume those. And so if and when that happens, news organizations that are part of the regular coverage, I think will participate. They will put on masks and gloves and use rotations and try to minimize their exposure. I just don't know how soon it can happen or what it's going to look like. I think it's going to have to look different. No matter how optimistic the president is, it's hard to imagine a stadium with 10,000 people happening in American politics in America anytime soon for any reason.
I just know that I know correspondents and camera people who really are itching to get back in the field, but I'm of a certain age where, like, go first. Let me see how that goes for you. It's a specific question for Teddy from one of our viewers. What does it mean to work in audience engagement?
It's a great question. Yeah. I actually don't get that a lot, which I'm surprised because I do think it's kind of vague for readers too. I mean, audience engagement's like a translation of what the social media team was in like 2014, 2015. I didn't join the audience team until 2015. The role of the audience team is to, I mean, in situations like this, the role of the audience team is just like, what are our readers talking about? What questions do they have? And how can we help with our coverage to answer that? And so I don't mean to, it's helpful for me to ground myself in like specific examples like this coverage. But when we talk about what they're talking about or what questions they have, we're talking about it online. So on Twitter, on Reddit, Facebook, sure, and how all these platforms are changing too. Facebook changing to Facebook groups. Reddit is constantly growing and always has a huge presence. Twitter sounds big, but actually isn't big at all. And so, you know, it's just, it's understanding, you know, it's understanding the platforms that our journalism goes to, and then either getting our journalism there or also just reporting on what the discussions are there. And I mean, there's kind of like, you can be on the audience team and do that, or you can be Taylor Lorenz at the New York Times and do that, be a full reporter. So I mean, there are blended areas on around newsrooms, and each team's a little different.
Well, let me ask, do you publish what you have discovered, or do you tell what you've discovered to editors and reporters?
Lately publishing. And that's just the nature of the coronavirus. It's just really busy. So for lately, let's see. I mean, I'm publishing guides to answer questions on certain topics. When coronavirus was first happening in DC, I was working with like Peter Jameson, one of our local reporters, to figure out what small moments, maybe big moments in your life, but small moments, you know, nationally that are being ruined. So like somebody's birthday, somebody's wedding. A wedding's a huge moment. I don't mean to belittle that, but like, you know, finding those grievances online and then reaching out to those people. And it's a really unique time for audience. And it's something I'm really excited about is, you know, like I was pointing out earlier, we can't go in person and talk to the person who can't get married, but there's a possibility that they posted that on Twitter or that they are talking about that in a community on Reddit. Like that's where somebody like I can go in and reach out to them and then just do reporting. You know, you just get them on the phone, but the difference is that they're talking online and not, you know, at a coffee shop. So.
Thank you. So we are halfway through our conversation. So this is probably a good time to ask a question that Katie has sent me that reflects our sponsor for this evening. Alexa, I'll throw this to you first. How did your time at the University of Maryland? prepare you to be adaptable in an ever-changing environment for journalism? How did Maryland prepare you for this?
I think Maryland was really good at throwing a lot of different stuff at you. So I was multi-platform, and I not only learned just how to go out and be a reporter, but I learned how to code, how to do photo editing, how to do video editing, and it was reporting on a bunch of different topics. I had to go to a courthouse in Prince George's County to report on local crime. I did more stuff at the state level, at the Maryland state level, and it was all just a bunch of different topics. And I think that helped me with just being able to look at something and know what I need to do to tackle that specific something. So whether it was crime or a more personal video interviewing, things like that, I think the diversity of the curriculum really helped.
So you can imagine me sitting in the journalism building, the old one, in a class with a manual typewriter, changing the ribbon and putting paper inside the typewriter. And we're all sitting there typing in class. Now, you can't imagine that.
I do have a typewriter. It's more decoration than useful. So I kind of know.
Margaret, how did Maryland prepare you?
I'm closer to the typewriter version of this answer. So I graduated as an undergraduate from the J School in 1994. It was already a very good journalism school. I got a great education in the trade there. But at the time that I went there, it was very sequence oriented, and there was none of what Alexa just described. Like basically you decided, are you going to be a writer? Are you going to be on TV? Do you have a mellow broadcasting voice? Like, or are you going to be behind the scenes, like a camera guy, a technician or whatever? And then like, once you locked in, that was kind of what you were doing. And I remember at one point being like, talking to an advisor and being like, can't decide if I should do TV or print. And they were like, please, you're clearly a print person. So, and I think one of the smartest things that Maryland has done is to, greatly bring down those walls, because in today's world, you really do have to do everything. There's no such thing as every print person is a TV person. Every TV person writes for the website. Everyone has to know how to set up their own shot. Like I've got, I can't show you because my background's up, but I've got this clippy thing right here and lights and stuff. So what I did get though, and I know this is still the case, out of my journalism education was just having professors who had been journalists themselves, who had been political reporters, breaking news reporters, cops reporters, beautiful like magazine writers who teach you how to ask questions, how to think about how to ask questions, how to think about authority figures and what your role is in the ecosystem. The notion that, the sort of whole trust but verify notion, it's not like there's good guys and there's bad guys and you just trust the good guys and don't trust the bad guys. Like, it's not like that. And everyone's spinning you, everyone's slightly full of it. And it's your job not to make friends with those people, not to decide like whose side you're on. It's your job. You serve the public and you set your biases off to the side. If you have any, of course, none of us have any. And it is your job to inform people in a way that no one else will, that the official sources won't, because they all have their own considerations. It's your job to cut through the BS and tell people what's really going on the best you can. And if that means people are pissed off at you, so be it. And so I think that's a lesson that no matter if you're covering state government, national government, if you're covering politics, or if you're covering Hollywood or sports or a pandemic, those principles serve you very well. It would have also been nice to know how to do my hair better and how to cut video. But so like in real life, nowadays we learn that stuff on the go, but being able to learn it in a university classroom with some of the best in the business is like a tremendous gift. And I love Maryland. Obviously I'm part of the board of visitors and stuff, but I've been a big advocate for many years for no matter what you think you want to do, learning how to do just enough of the rest of it that you can modify and turn on a dime when you need to.
Thank you. Jason?
My time at Maryland comes in two acts. There was Jason, the biology major, who took organic chemistry 2 times and figured out this ain't for me. And then the second act was meeting some very good people in journalism, whether it was Sue Copen or Dr. Thornton, who assured me that I had skills that really that played into journalism well. And I learned it from, as you were just saying, from people who have been there before. And I started to understand more of what my role could be in the journalism world. And so then there were skills as we're sort of getting out of the typewriter range and into the computers. And I think that I learned to respect journalism more after meeting those folks. And so I think that having people who are professionals in that job, I think that their way of nurturing young folks into a career, I think changed my life. I don't know where I would have been if I hadn't met the folks in the J School.
Nice shout out to Sue Copen. When I was program director at WMUC, she was one of the news people there. And it's interesting how it's wonderful that you mentioned Lee Thornton. I knew her through Maryland, but I also knew her at NPR. And she's a wonderful person. And those of us who had any contact with her certainly miss her.
For sure.
Thank you for that. Maryland, who did I forget? Teddy?
Yeah, I would say what Margaret said about trust but verify. It's been so busy lately. I've really actually just been leaning on the core stuff from Merrill. The like, what is this person not telling me? Why does this sound like the best thing since sliced bread? Just checking my copy way too many times than my editor wants me to check it. And I don't know, I think with this coverage, I've gotten so much more back to, look, I mean, you always have to get it absolutely right. But I think in where we are right now, to me, it weighs on me so much more. And so, yeah, a lot of just like the don't get a Merrill F, but you're in the real world now is how I think of it. So.
Thank you. Now this is I'm gonna have to read this question. It's from one of our viewers. In the past, conspiracy theories lived on the fringe and traditional media outlets didn't necessarily address them. But now, because of convergence and new media publishers like Facebook, the fringe is becoming more central to the narrative. When do you address conspiracy theory? For example, there's a YouTube video circulating about Dr. Fauci that an ex-employee was jailed. Snopes has taken on part of it, but at what point does this disinformation become a topic the regular media need to tackle, not just Snopes? So this is, again, what is true, what is not? What do you do about conspiracy theory? Anyone want to grab that?
I can grab it to start. I think things need to be addressed when they start to cause harm. And I think cause harm can be whether they, today during the coronavirus, if there's a crazy conspiracy theory, is it causing harm to public health? Is it causing harm to the truth and the facts? And I think causing harm just means, is it doing anything to cast doubt on the science, the data? Is it just becoming too much? Is it too crowded and the truth isn't getting through because the conspiracy theory is taking the spotlight? And so I think you need to balance not giving too much light to something crazy, but you also need to acknowledge the crazy and say, this isn't why that's true, and let's focus on what we know and less on crazy YouTube videos.
Anyone else? I'll let that stand.
No, because I'm not going to be able to say it as well as this person, so I just want to cite that I think Charlie Warzel has a lot of really smart thoughts here about fake news and conspiracy theories and its effect on, sorry, I don't know if I said he's at Charlie Warzel, he's a New York Times columnist. I don't know if I just said his name, but I think he has a lot of smart perspective on how much is it is conspiracy theory and how much it is this weird gray area of like in between fake news and everything else. And I think actually a lot of stuff might fall more towards that middle. And then the other thought I just had is like, yeah, you know, we got to keep these platforms accountable. And I think all of the reporters who are doing that do commendable work. And to me, that's, you know, these videos or stories are only riding on the backs of these algorithms that, you know, work so well in so many ways. And so, yeah.
Thank you. All right, so this is a question you can answer. I think it's got 3 parts. You can answer any part you want. Do you think that this pandemic will in some way, this particular story will in some way change how we report or change our relationship with those who own us? Parenthetically, we've all demonstrated that we can do the job with less. Will it change our relationship with the audience? What is the impact of this reporting now?
Yeah, I love this question. It's like clearly from a journalist, or someone who has been a journalist. So the question about the people who own us, meaning the corporate parent or the source of the money, the people who pay you. Like, I think that's a real question. And I think it's a real question for, everything's exponential on TV, right? Travel is hugely expensive on TV. Bringing guests into the set, flying out to the interview, flying out to every single thing, you know, like covering the White House, for example, can cost, I don't know, $1 million a year per person, maybe for some TV enterprises. It's less for print, but if you're on Air Force One, you're standing up special events coverage. Covering a political campaign can cost millions of dollars when you're on the road and you're doing it on that big scale. And for newspapers on the other end of the spectrum, the pandemic is crushing a lot of local news, as we all know, and a lot of the print side of newspapers. And so in those cases, it's like, can the news organization survive? And if it does survive, is it going to shift the balance to how much it relies on wires for the news pages versus its own reporters? And then for everyone else who's in the middle, I think I think it has shown a few things. It has shown that work from home is totally possible in a lot of cases. It has shown that although there's no replacement still for being in the room with somebody, and it has forced an experimentation with technology that we haven't really had before, like Zoom or Citrus WebEx or whatever platform you're using. Even just 2 months ago, the interviews were much more awkward than they are now. We're all getting better at doing it. And nobody would have taken that risk before, because why would you do it if your competitor wasn't and theirs would look so much better? But when everyone's doing it, you know, like there's less risk, and what alternative do you have? And so I think it's going to force some innovation and find some efficiencies that are really good, and it'll probably on the downside lead to cheapness in some areas. And I think like it's a really smart question, but we don't know the answers to it yet, but we can guess the answers, and that's my guess, is that there'll be some good that comes out of it and some bad that comes out of it. And in the short term, probably some efforts for cost savings, because we all think going to be kind of a long, careful, slow climb back, even for people who are going to be doing okay out of this.
Thank you. Jason, will this change what you do?
Yeah, I think I'll give you 2. First, I think it'll change, and it's already changing our relationship with our viewers. Our phones haven't rang as much as they are right now. And it's not like the angry viewer about a story that you just did. It's people looking for help. In Maryland, our unemployment website went down. But immediately as it came up, it immediately went down. And ever since that day, people are calling. It's not like they're calling to specifically complain about the computer itself. It's to, hey, can you guys help us find some kind of outlet? Can you help me do this, that, or the other thing? Is there a story that you've done recently that might be able to help a family of 4 that does this, that, the other thing? We hadn't gotten those phone calls before. It's usually, you know, a nasty gram or a pat on the back, but usually more nasty gram. But I think now viewers are more seeking you out as a 411, and I think that helps to guide our stories. You know, as those phone calls came in, it kind of predicted what the lead story would be that night because we knew where people were hurting the most. And I also agree with the work at home method. I think that a lot of companies are going to find out that their newsroom does not have to be as big of a building as it is. I think that the investment in technology at home may outpace what they can do in a building. I think it may have been on CBS Sunday Morning where you guys did a story on how to make your Zoom call better. And you went through and showed, you know, where the laptop should sit and if you should be near the window and that, this, that, and the other thing. And it's become daily currency now. And I think that bigger companies have recognized that. And I think they'll take advantage of it. I think it'll save money and people have gotten used to seeing what a call like this looks like. And I don't think it's as offensive anymore as seeing the cell phone video of a bystander. So yeah, twofold. I think those could be 2 ways that this will change things in the future.
Alexa?
I am going off of what they both said. I think it will change not just journalism, but just the landscape of business as usual, what can be done remotely. And in this aspect, this situation, when can we get back to being in an office and doing face-to-face interviews when we can just do everything over Zoom or phone call and we don't have to risk anything? So will it ever be back to a normal, or have we just gotten really comfortable now with this technology that we don't even want to risk anything, you know, when the country reopens? And so I think not just for journalism, but just for people in business and, you know, education, how much really do we need to be sending kids off to college campuses, you know, even for a winter or a spring semester? Can't everything just be done via Zoom? And I think not just journalism, but it's going to change a lot of industries.
Teddy?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm most interested. Oh, I mean, all the questions are important, but the one that jumped out to me was just if it changes our relationship with our audience. I mean, I think that's like, I think Amelia, the digital managing editor at the Post, would say that's my job. Like that's our team's job. That's what I'm paid to figure out. I think it's changing it now. I think readers want different journalism right now. I'm not necessarily convinced that that's going to be the case 2 years from now. I think it's the reason why I'm tasked with writing very utilitarian stories that answer the questions that you need. And we'll figure it out. I mean, just personally, I think anytime as we get into this more subscriber-based model, anytime that we can take what our readers are concerned about and reflect that in our coverage, especially for local coverage when it gets so much to like who's taking out my trash, questions like that, then yeah, I mean, I think, you know, starting at the audience's point of view as much as possible is really helpful. And then showing them the byproduct of the article. I think so often we ask for questions, but we don't actually do anything with it. So I'm excited, but I do think it could go back to normal very easily.
Question from a viewer. Does anyone have any pet peeve, any cons about the Zoom interview? Is there anything that you just like does it make you crazy?
I can't think of any cons. It's definitely made our lives a lot easier because I'm telling you, the first week there was fear. We didn't know how we're going to get anything accomplished. Right. Then you know, you found out the thing will record for you, and then we figured out how to route it through the technical guys back at the station. So it just, I think that it put a lot of people at ease because we had gone through so many ideas of how we're going to make the day-to-day work. So we haven't run into any cons yet. I'm sure there's going to be a hang up at some point. But for right now, it's making life a lot easier than we expected.
I mean, I think the hacking stuff is a concern. You want to know whether you're having a private conversation with someone or not. I think it's not entirely comfortable having an off the record conversation or moving off the record in a Zoom conversation with a source. I'd rather hop on Signal and do it the old school way. But it beats not being able to talk to somebody at all. And I think, like, for TV, this is a bigger deal than it is for print. For print, you can just be on the phone or be on text or be on some version of the phone, right? That's encrypted. But on TV, you need to have the image as well as the voice. And so in the absence of being able to go into a studio, it's a lifesaver. The thing on Zoom that we've all experienced, you don't have to be a journalist to do this, is if you have a group call and whatever goofball is eating the potato chips or, takes the computer into the bathroom and turns off the video camera, but they forget to mute the audio. I think this happened in court today. So, like, it's a brave new world. Even a justice in a robe can make a mistake. So, like, we're all still learning how to do it, but it's actually been, the software, I think, has been very intuitive and overwhelmingly has been like a positive thing to help us bridge, this weird period.
All right.
House cats are also an issue. My cat Artie has already made an appearance several times. She has been locked out today.
All right, we have 2 lightning round questions. First one, at CBS, we were ordered to vacate the building immediately back in March. My CBS laptop is still on my office desk. This is my home computer. So, very quickly, what is the one thing you wish you had in your home that would help you do your work? Very quickly, go around. Teddy?
An actual good desk chair. I'm sitting on a stool over there, so that would be nice.
Oh, Alexa?
My 2 big monitors side by side, so everything was super big and I could move a whole bunch of windows around at one time.
Oh, Margaret?
The sweet green on the ground floor and maybe a fellow editor to sit next to, but overwhelmingly nothing. Like, overwhelmingly, other than winning the Powerball, I've got everything I need right here.
Jason?
Hey, I still go in every day, so if someone could send me a teacher to help me with homeschooling with the kids, that would be great.
Wow. All right, second question. Obviously, you're living and breathing this story all the time. What is I know we've just met. It's a very personal question to ask you, but when you need to get away from this news, what is the binge-worthy program you're going to, or the website, or the thing that really makes you happy? Teddy?
Okay, you don't mean just a show. Well, no, I guess for a show, I've been watching West Wing, which is with the commercial break, like they have the commercial break in the Netflix show, and then it usually ends on a bright spot. It's actually pretty nice. So, yeah.
Thank you. Alexa?
Well, besides the obvious answer of Tiger King, I have invested in several puzzles. So I like to, at night or on the weekends, turn off electronics and just sit at my table, sometimes with a glass of wine, with some puzzles.
My wife and I have been working for probably 7 days on this 1,000-piece Snoopy puzzle. I'll tell you, when we find one of those pieces that we think, oh, it has to be a missing piece, there's a lot of happiness in the house.
It's the small things in life.
Jason?
I hate auto racing, but I fell in love with the F1 documentary series on Netflix. I never thought I would like auto racing. I knew nothing about it, and now I can't get enough of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Margaret?
I got through like 4 installments of Tiger King and just ran out of the room, like with my hair on fire. I couldn't take it anymore. My weird guilty pleasure that I cannot explain, but it's so good, it's so bad, but so good, is Magnum PI. I've forced John and Abby to watch Magnum PI reruns with me. We're like halfway through season 2 now. Also playing Uno late night Uno rounds with our 16-year-old and going for late drives to nowhere just to see different neighborhoods of DC when no one's out.
And what is your best advice about dealing with a 16-year-old in the house?
No, it's great. It's so much easier, honestly, than like dealing with a 5-year-old is really, really hard, right? 16-year-olds can go to school by themselves in their room. And when you have a 16-year-old, you're more worried about what they're going to do when they leave the house. So when they can't leave the house, like it's actually, it's a huge weight off of my chest. So knock on wood. But I feel bad for her. Like she loves soccer. Her life is, everything's not the way it's supposed to be when you're 16 right now. And so we're trying to help her manage through that. But we're healthy. We're all very privileged to be able to work either mostly at home or at least to be safe the way we're working. And I think any one of us on this panel is grateful for that.
I've got one last question for you. I just want to shout out to the dean. I don't know if Lucy is with us, but I know she's had, as many educators have, remarkable challenges. And as far as I can tell, she's really dealing with them and holding the college together. And I really salute her for everything she's done. If she's not on the call, maybe she'll see this, but you have fans.
Absolutely.
All right.
We'll definitely pass that along, Jay.
All right, well, thank you. Here's probably the last question. What have you been able to accomplish that you didn't know you could do before this? Jason?
Are we at home or professionally?
I think professionally.
Okay. I was going to say, there are a lot of things I've fixed lately that I didn't know I could fix. I would just say adapting. I think that, I took on this podcasting project and I had no idea how to make that work. And I feel like finding a way to engage the same people that we had in the studio, having the same connection, being able to hold the people accountable and also have a good laugh. I found out a lot about myself as a person and as a journalist. So I think it has taught me to adapt in what has become a really extreme situation in a very short amount of time.
Wow, thank you. Margaret?
Yeah, I think adapting is probably the right answer. I've always been fascinated in polling. A number of years ago, I thought about leaving journalism to become a pollster. I didn't do it, but this weekly poll that we do know on the coronavirus was sort of born out of the moment and out of necessity, and ended up being this beautiful gift for me to be able to work on a poll very directly in a way I never had before. And I think for all of us, like, it's easy to see all the things that we can't do with this, but I have been trying to look strategically at the kind of forced windows of opportunity that the crisis is creating to push myself and my team to try things differently, to take risks we wouldn't normally take, not health risks, but work risks or kind of intellectual risks. And so that's been really good. I'm just trying to think that way about this.
Wow. Alexa?
I think a lot of it, for me, something that I never thought I could accomplish was taking the same subject and making it interesting still, not just to me reporting it, but to the reader. A lot of articles about the coronavirus or the newest guidelines, newest updates, numbers, and that can get boring to read, but also kind of monotonous to write. And so, your full heart might not be in it. And so I think something that I've been able to do is just take the data and the, nuts and bolts of something and either put a new perspective on it, get a quote from a new expert that can kind of give a little bit more insight. But I think just trying to find a different take to make things more interesting out of the, day-to-day monotony. I think that's helped.
God bless. Teddy?
I guess this is kind of vague, but to me, this moment feels a lot like a campaign season where there's just a ton of opportunities just falling on your lap. And so I think that the challenging thing or it's just been trying to take those opportunities and like make the most of them and also, make sure that doing good journalism and not just hit and publish. So.
Well, I'm always proud to be a graduate of the Merrill School and Maryland. I am especially proud tonight Thank you, Teddy, Alexa, Jason, Margaret, for your insights. And I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. It's been great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.